In Washington, President Donald Trump forges ahead with his agenda while facing an onslaught of lawsuits intended to halt his efforts. Last week, President Trump gave even more power to billionaire Elon Musk and his so-called Department of Government Efficiency to make broad cuts to staff in several departments. The president also signed off on another set of tariffs he argues will boost business inside the U.S., and his battle against sanctuary cities continues in the courts, with lawsuits against Chicago and New York already underway. Congressman Mike Quigley represents Illinois' 5th District, joining me this morning to talk about more of what's going on Capitol Hill. It's a lightning round, Congressman. Thanks for coming in.
Ready to go.
All right, let's start with the DOJ lawsuit.
Yes.
Because ordinarily, when Congress passes law, those would supersede anything Illinois passed. But we're dealing with executive orders now. Who will win in that battle?
The state wins, but in addition, this almost virtual language, the same language that was in a California law, was upheld by the appellate court, and the Supreme Court refused to hear it. So this is good law. Why he's doing it now is about fear, retribution, chaos.
We watch news every day and we see USAID, U.S. aid being cut off. The administration says, no, we're not cutting off certain funds like PEPFAR, and others are saying, yes, we are. Can you explain the confusion that's going on? Is it that money is there, but the people are being fired? What's happening?
They're dismantling the system. They told people they have to be home within 30 days. I suppose it varies one country to another, but basically the system is being dismantled, almost impossible to be put back together, reminding us what his first defense secretary said. General Mattis, not a lefty guy, he said, if you don't have foreign aid, you better buy me more bullets. It's important soft power. It keeps us safe.
You also see Veterans Affairs, 1,000 workers being fired just the other day. This is going on in a bunch of departments. Now, look, supporters of the president say, this is what we bargained for. This is what we wanted. We have too much waste and fraud and corruption in government. He's getting rid of it.
Yeah, there's a surgical way to do this, to actually accomplish that mission, which we'd be glad to be a part of. And then there's the sledgehammer, which is thought less, and it hurts people. You know, I was at Jesse Brown this week, passing out Valentines to veterans, and was talking to people about those cuts. There was nothing in the bargain about cutting services to the people who served our country and kept us safe.
Government shutdown looms on March 14th. Should it shut down? Democrats have been talking about standing united, not voting for a package that has things that you could not accept. But you know as well as me that if it does shut down, Speaker Mike Johnson will be at a microphone saying the Democrats all voted against it. They're the ones who shut the government down. And Republicans lately have had a louder voice than Democrats. You
know, they have, but when it comes to shutting down the government, it has typically come when the Republicans are in charge. So what they're basically having to admit is they can't pass a bill in their own caucus. They can't govern, they can't work together, even within their own caucus to do this. You know, so we'll take on that argument. In the final analysis, the way democracy was designed by our founding fathers is they wanted a two-party system where people had to compromise and they had to work together. And so we're hoping that at some point in time they come to that realization, because there's a lot of work to do.
If money is in there, the Democrats want wildfire money and other kinds of projects, but they want the debt ceiling to be raised. They're looking for $4 trillion so far. We'll see where it goes. Is there a point where Democrats would say we have to go for this because we want some of these funds here?
Well, look, I've always voted to raise the debt ceiling because these are obligations. President Reagan used to rail against those who wouldn't raise the debt ceiling. I think it's important, though. They want to raise the debt ceiling primarily to change their tax policies. They want to give very, very wealthy Americans tax breaks. That's where the money comes from. So sure, that has to be part of the negotiated agreement. Let's go to the Middle East. President Trump says we don't have to buy Gaza. There's nothing to buy. We're going to hold it, cherish it, and we'll do this under U.S. authority. He made those comments actually sitting next to Jordan's King Abdullah, who opposes this. The plan to move 2 million Palestinians out and make this a river area. What's your reaction to all of this? Because he repeats it over. He's serious about it. Yeah, look, and I met with King Abdullah this week, and obviously it's a non-starter for anyone in the Middle East. It's not going to happen, and it shouldn't happen. I mean, there's no other way to describe it other than ethnic cleansing. So let's start over. There is an opportunity here for a long-term peace involved with a two-state solution. I know it's never happened before, but this is a prime opportunity. So if the president really is serious about a Nobel Peace Prize, let's quit talking about vacating Gaza and talking about a long-term peace agreement.
Ukraine, very important to you. You wear the pin. You've been involved for a very long time in this area. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said this past week that Ukraine's goals are unrealistic in terms of recovering the territory they lost to Russia and going back to 2014 borders, and says there can be no NATO membership for Ukraine. Your view on all of this, because there's discussions of Putin and Trump meeting. Whether or not Zelensky's part of it seems to be confusing. And of course, towards the end of the week, Vice President Vance also speaking with Zelensky. I don't know if you're Zelensky, how comfortable are you with the way things are progressing?
No, obviously he's very concerned, as he should be. And to remind ourselves of why this matters, right? We are helping Ukraine for the same reasons we fought the Second World War. So diplomacy 101, you don't trade anything for nothing. So they're normalizing, the Trump administration, relationships with Russia, getting absolutely nothing. Remembering that the Russians, Putin invaded Ukraine, a sovereign democratic country. So, how are we going to rebuild it? How are we going to secure their long-term security concerns? How are you going to hold Putin accountable for the war crimes that took place? The thousands of kids that were stolen and taken into Russia? So that's where this conversation should start.
And by the way, if there is a call, I've read that it could be a 20-year hold from Ukraine joining NATO. I mean, how important is Ukraine getting into NATO in the more reasonable future?
They've earned it. For all that NATO is supposed to be, all the reasons we formed the United Nations, the EU, all the reasons we formed NATO was to prevent what happened in the Second World War. NATO has been the one fighting and dying for democracy, right? And to me, they've earned it. It needs to happen in the near future, and we need to be behind NATO in that regard as well.
Inflation up 3% for the first time since June. Consumer prices also up. Your view, Trump has said, get ready. We could have some pain here in terms of prices. People screamed and yelled before the election. I don't hear a lot of that now.
Look, what the president's doing is going to cost you more money. Tariffs under the broad economist spectrum are really taxes on people. And for anyone to imagine that you can impose taxes and cost them up, it's just failing to look at reality. And the fact that these are against our allies as well. And if we don't think that they're not going to retaliate and put tariffs on goods coming out, which hurts our production, it's going to hurt production, it's going to make things more expensive, it's going to be a slow drag on the economy, and it'll come out under the Trump administration.
All right, Congressman Mike Quigley, thank you for your time this morning. Got a lot on your plate, but thanks for always keeping our viewers up to date. We're going to have one more break, and we'll be back with more on the week ahead after this. Stay with us.